commemorating the Manorkill Creamery. On behalf of the Conesville Historical Society and the Town of Conesville, I would like to thank everyone for joining us with a special thank you to the following people and groups. Skeeter Pearsall and the Town of Conesville Highway Department for installing the new sign out front. The Town of Conesville Board for its support of local history endeavors and for permission to install the marker on town property. Community members who have shared or will share their memories of the Creamery, as well as any sources they have that are tied to the Creamery. Wes Benson and Amanda and Corey Young for making delicious old-fashioned homemade ice cream, which is being turned as we speak. Conesville Historical Society members for their contributions toward the acquisition of the marker and development of today's programs and events. And last but not least, Dottie Pickett and Nicholas J. Jurian for their monetary donations and continued support towards the mission and vision of the Conesville Historical Society. As the program indicates, we will start with a brief history of the Manorkill Creamery, which stood on this site in the parking lot where you guys just parked. We'll have some remarks from Town Supervisor Federese, an open forum to share memories and connections to the Creamery, and an unveiling. Immediately following the Creamery, we invite you to join us for some homemade ice cream. As I look around me tonight, I see many faces of many people who are connected to the Creamery, either personally or through their family history. There are among us families and descendants of families who did business with the Creamery, including my own young family. There are truck drivers who helped deliver milk at one point or another in this community, and then there are descendants of those very truck drivers here too. And then there are farmers who continue the legacy of farming, even if it's not dairy, in our community. One of my curiosities while researching the Creamery centered around people. As I was working to transcribe and analyze a large collection of resources, I decided one day to begin making a list of all of the names that came up in articles related to the Creamery. The surname list is available here today at the back of the room, but I find it necessary to point out that the list contains approximately 250 names right now. That is a lot of people connected to this Creamery, and definitely more than I thought I would find. So as I move forward with the history of the Creamery, I want you to remember that while this is a general overview, there are at least 250 families representing hundreds more of individual people tied to this local historic landmark, whether they are farmers, truck drivers, butter makers, management, repairmen, or a myriad of others. Their story contains a sentence, maybe a paragraph, maybe even chapters about the Creamery too. The people are as important as the business in our history. Now for a brief business history. A major contributor to the local economy in 20th century Conesville from approximately 1900 to 1966 was the Manorkill Creamery. It employed several people in the plant, subtracted many trucking firms and individuals, and gave local farmers a place to send their milk. Earliest discussions about the construction of a creamery in the town of Conesville appear in newspapers beginning in 1897. The creamery was formally organized in 1899 following a series of meetings, and by 1900, the Manorkill Cooperative Creamery was incorporated. Until 1966, the Manorkill Creamery engaged in the processing of milk from local farmers, including the production of cheese, dry curd, and milk to be shipped throughout the area and down the Hudson into the New York metropolitan area. In 1900, it is reported that the Creamery received an average of 5,000 pounds of milk daily. In just over a year in business, that number climbed to 13,000 pounds, and by 1905, it was 20 pounds daily, and at least 1,000 pounds of butter being outputted daily. At times, milk was received from skimming stations throughout the area, including the one in Conesville at the current town hall. In the wintertime, the Creamery slowed processing and a large amount of ice was harvested from throughout the area and placed in the ice house. Over the years, many changes were made to the Creamery, particularly in the 1930s. In 1931, an annex was built to be used as a bottling facility. In 1932, electric lights were installed. In 1936, the Stanford Mirror Recorder reported Earl Krieger of Gilboa is doing a job of painting at McDermott Brothers bottling plant, which includes both the creamery and the garage. A new power line was recently installed by the electric company. This enables the plant to use more machinery at all times, and instead of a one-phase, it is now three-phase, which provides higher power. Throughout its life, small pieces of land were acquired from private owners to be added to the creamery property. Newspapers report a few unfortunate incidents regarding the creamery. In both 1932 and 1949, its owners were fined for polluting the Manorkill, a stream known for its vibrant trout. In 1932, the Mirror Reporter writes, the immediate cause of the trouble was said to be a combination of acid used in washing milk bottles and a cesspool that overflowed, the contents finding their way into the stream. On a positive note, the newspapers also reported that this pollution was properly corrected. On a national scale, we can tie the 1933 milk strikes to an incident here. Let's contextualize for a moment. During the Depression, in places like New York City, retail milk prices were cut to increase sales, but farmers and suppliers were the only ones hurt most, and could barely afford to survive. In some places, farmers were only receiving 2 cents per quart of milk. This is confirmed by a report by the New York State Milk Control Board, which reported even the bare necessities of life could not be secured by many farm families, and many dairymen were threatened with the loss of farms and homes in which their meager lifetime savings were invested. A well-respected researcher kind of wrote about this, and he said that in April 1933, a large group of dairy farmers in western and central New York organized 4-day strikes in order to force the state legislature to implement price controls. In August of 1933, farmers organized a larger and more confrontational strike in protest against the state's milk control board, which had been created by the state legislature after the April strike. By August, farmers' opinion of the milk control board had soured. They charged that the board's price fixing had favored corporations and their associated co-ops at the expense of farmers. To put it in context, it's right around the turn of the 1920s and 1930s that McDermott Brothers, a corporation, bought the cooperative creamery. So, as New York Times reporter concluded, the 1933 strikes possibly brought New York State closer to martial law than at any time since the Revolutionary War. Across the country, milk was dumped, and there were some violent encounters during 1933, particularly during the month of August. By mid-August, it is estimated that approximately 15,000 New York State farmers were involved in the milk strike, a substantial increase from the estimated less than 1,000 on the first day. In New York State, counties were authorized to appoint as many special deputies as needed to keep peace during the strikes. The Associated Press reported that there was an attempt to burn the Manorkill Creamery that was halted before any major damage could be done. The article dated August 10, 1933 reads, only a few instances of violence were reported overnight. An attempt was made to burn McDermott's Creamery at Manorkill in Schoharie County, but the blaze was put out before the plant was disabled. Later, local columns boasted that the creamery never ceased operations during the milk strikes. The creamery was owned by many individuals and corporations, including the McDermott Brothers and Middletown Milk and Cream Company, which eventually became Deltown Foods. In 1966, the creamery was purchased by the town of Conesville, and this property transfer was not without controversy, as some townspeople hoped another business would occupy its space and stimulate the local economy. These people organized a petition to delay the sale, but were unsuccessful long term. Most of the creamery was later torn down in the 1980s, except for this garage that you're currently sitting in, which is now serving as a town storage facility. Contextualization in a broader state and national context is helpful in understanding why small creameries like this one in Manorkill closed. And I'm sure many of you sitting here can relate to what I'm about ready to say. One of the largest changes in the dairy industry occurred mid-century and has to do with how the milk was stored and was transported. Most